Recording and live.
Excellent. Well, good evening, all. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call the Thursday, June 22nd, 2023 virtual meeting of the Newburyport Historical Commission to order. Please be aware that this proceeding, like all city virtual meetings, is being recorded. We'll begin with roll call. Andrew Bernhardt.
I'm here.
And Mark Sandrone.
Present.
Christopher Fay, I believe, is not here. Joe Morgan.
Here.
Okay. Chris Sautel.
Present.
And Biff Baus, Vice Chair, is here. And Glenn Richards, Chair.
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
All right, well, it appears we have a quorum. Also present, Caitlin Sullivan of the Office of Planning and Development, and Gretchen Joey is taking minutes for us. First on the agenda, it does look like a demolition delay application. I don't believe we have anything on schedule for that.
That's correct. Nothing scheduled for that.
Okay, great. All right, so we can move on to the DCOD review of 149 High Street. Do we have some folks here that are going to be presenting this?
Yes, we have Kim Turner from the mayor's office and Mr. Charles Griffin from the Parks Commission.
Great. I don't know who will be speaking first, but if you have your microphone on, and we've got you unmuted from this end, I believe.
Sure. Thank you very much. My name is Kim Turner. I'm a manager of special projects for the city of Newburyport, and I want to thank you all for your time tonight to review this project with us. Next slide, please. Just to give a broad overview tonight, we're going to try to keep it as short as we can. I'll start the presentation just giving a high-level overview of the project and why we are coming before you tonight, what our ask is from you all. I'm going to hand it over to Chuck Griffin, who is on the Parks Commission and is the liaison to the Bartlett Mall, to talk a little bit about the park history and dive into more specifics about the detail of the project. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions. Next slide, please. So just to give a very broad overview of what we're doing down at the park for those that are not aware. We have a large restoration project that we're hoping to get underway very quickly here at the Bartlett Mall. The planning stage of this has been going on for quite some time. About a year and a half ago, we hired an engineering team to take a look at the frog pond itself, which is an old kettle hole. It's a stagnant water body that's become quite unhealthy over the years with recurring algal blooms. The reason why it is becoming increasingly unhealthy as an ecosystem is that the muck at the bottom of the pond is laden with phosphorus and toxic materials, which are contributing to those algal blooms. A very high level sort of synopsis of what the plan is there is to dewater the pond, install a liner that will separate that toxic muck from the water column, install a bedrock well to create input of fresh water with an overflow that will drain into catch basins on site to keep the water at a consistent level so that it doesn't receive the high fluctuations in water from spring through summer. And then circulate the water below surface to keep it healthy. Next slide, please. So the reason why we're here tonight is that the Bartlett Mall lies within the DOD. Part of our efforts to restore the water quality will require us to construct a small pump house that will hold a wet well and pump that will store and protect the equipment that will be needed to keep the pond healthy for years to come. Because it's a new structure, we are required to file for a special permit, and we understand that the planning board will be looking for an opinion from the Historical Commission, which is why we're here before you tonight. Next slide, please. This is a very critical moment in the project. It's a very complex project. As I said, we've been working with the engineering team for about a year and a half now. The water quality demands a unique solution, and we believe that our team has come up with that solution. We have received funding for the project through a CPA bond, and I know many of you took part in writing a letter to the CPC in support of this project, and Chuck will dive a little bit more into that in a moment. We're at a critical moment where we have great political and public support to see this project through. And we believe that it fits the parameters of the special permit with the planning board because it will promote the health, safety, and welfare of residents by protecting our cultural heritage and our history, enhancing opportunities for cultural tourism and for the residents of Newburyport for generations to come. Next slide, please. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Chuck, who can dive a little bit deeper into the history of the mill and provide more detail on the pump house itself and the details of that. Chuck, are you there?
Yes, I am. I don't see my picture up there, but that's just as well. There, I see Glenn. In any case, I thank you very much, Chairman Richards, and the rest of you with the commission for giving us this time. I think a lot of you know this story, but in the 1700s, we had livestock, rope making, training, etc. It was a very active place. It was the town common, and you see this earliest picture we have of anything going on in Newburyport. And I think you might find it interesting if you go up in the cemetery up on the hill, and you can see this same view today, or you'd be able to if we didn't have all the trees. But this view was taken from that spot up near Doug Bullock's memorial bench. In any case, Mr. Bartlett made the mistake probably of donating over $200,000 in that year's money to filling in a ravine that's at the head of Green Street. And we think that water was allowed to outlet at that point. And since that time, though, it's been stagnant except for some work done to make a firefighting system. Federal Courthouse was built in 1805. It's the second freestanding courthouse. It's the first one's in Salem downtown, but this is a freestanding courthouse that is actually out of the downtown. And as such, it's a very rare building. It's the first time that a courthouse was built that wasn't in the center of town, and it's purpose built to be a courthouse. The fountain was installed in 91 to circulate the water, and you go almost 100 years later, Briggs and other people worked on the fountain. Caitlin, next slide. We've referred to Charles Eliot a lot in this fundraising and in the ideas for the park. Eliot's father was the president of Harvard University, and to this day is considered the most important president Harvard's ever had. And his son came here and did this work for us in the few years, 2 or 3 years that he was on his own, and when he returned from Europe. He became Olmsted's partner after doing about 3 projects, where ours was the first one. In any case, he wanted to see this pond be handled as other ponds were. He'd gone to Europe and had seen how cities took care of their water features, and they always had a permanent edge and used generally city water to maintain the water level. And anyhow, he didn't get that. That wasn't possible at the time. But his ideas were, as you can see in this photograph, the date of which we have, because it's cut into the negative in 1891, you can see how perfect the slopes were graded. That was work done by the MIA, Mall Improvement Association of that day. The water went up and down. He wanted the trees to be branched high so that you had distant views. He took these same ideas He and Olmsted used them in Boston for their parks. The idea was to be able to have a distant view under the branches of a tree. No flowering plants. When they finished, they wrote a report, about 20 pages, talking about what they'd done in great detail. They actually printed that report. We have it. And the idea was to complete the northwest corner where the playground is. Next, Caitlin. So what we're dealing with, we have at that corner, it's never been graded finally. In the early days, there was a school there and it was on 2 levels. And the lower level, the MIA at the day just dumped the excess soil they had. And they said, we can't get to this. We're out of money. We're done. Surely someone will fix that corner. And here we are these years later, 120 years later. And there'll be a playground at this corner, an accessible playground, and that will be installed this fall. So we have a problem of, as Kim alluded to, we have a problem of where to put a vault. We have to have a vault that's approximately 12-foot square inside. And of course, whatever the wall thickness, add to that. So somewhat, if it was masonry, somewhat less than 14-foot square. I had proposed earlier, and Kim and I had worked on different locations, but we were thinking of putting the vault below the playground. And you can see here one drawing for that. And the difficulty in that is several. We have a problem with timing because the playground needs to really go in before we start the park repair. And the cost was high. And there's, to me, the bigger issue as an architect, and since you have an architect on your board commission, see what other people think. But if you look at the lower left picture, that shows how big a cheek wall would be, the walls adjacent to being able to walk into a structure. The door, say, is in red, the location, a vault under the playground. That's a section showing what that would look like. There's nothing about that is quiet or restful. And I'll have to add my own prejudice to it. Every time I see a vault underground, it reminds me of graves. Frequently they are, and they're never very happy places because they're in the process of falling apart. So next slide, Caitlin. So it came up with the idea of not putting it under the playground because it didn't work in so many ways, but to simply make it associated with a dock. We're going to have the skiffs that are made in Amesbury will be on this pond, and we think will be a very great attraction for people to come and to physically get on the pond, the water of which now won't kill or harm anyone that would fall into it for a short period. So I looked at having this be a freestanding building, which I think is the way to do it. And as far as its appearance, thinking it should be brick. We only have one structure on Bartlett Mall, obviously, and that's Bullfinch's Courthouse, which is almost a sacred building. We won't get into that now, but I think if we kept the building here to be of small scale brick, and if the budget allowed it to, I'd like to see the roof be Munson Maine slate of the smaller size, but shown here is a copper standing seam roof. So that's the concept for the design. And that's what we're here to have you weigh in on. Next slide, Caitlin. So this is asking for questions.
Great. Thank you so much for showing us through this presentation. I think we can just start with, do we have anyone from the public that has questions? Caitlin, do you see anybody that's logged in at this point?
I do see an attendee, but I'm not seeing their hand raised at this time.
Okay. Well, so we could, let's see. If we would like to So if,
Biff, I wonder if I can ask, before we get everyone's comments, can I ask a question of the presenters?
sure,
The question is, actually, I guess you sort of answered it. I was reviewing this with my dear wife and she said, well, can't they put it underground? So I guess you have answered that very well. And is that location dictated by hydrogeographical or hydrogeological features, or was there another, is there any logic behind the placing it in that corner?
Do you want to answer that, Kim, or should I?
Just briefly, you're asking why we chose the location for the freestanding pump house.
Yeah.
So one reason is that the dock location is critical in that area because the dock and the pump house are critical to be near one another, because where the pipe comes in and out of the pump house for the recirculation, the dock will actually protect the pipe as it enters into the pond. So the dock is acting twofold as a protective barrier for the pipe, and obviously easy access, a straight line to the pump house. We felt that that was the better location to have the dock. I think at one end or the other of the pond, where the ramp that comes down from the street, just for ease of access of maintenance of getting boats in and out, it just seemed like the logical place to put it. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And Biff, as long as I'm talking, should I just go ahead and give my view and then you can move on to the rest of the committee or commission?
sure, we can do that. Yeah.
Unless anyone else has any questions, I don't know. Yeah, basically, and my view in this discussion doesn't weigh any more than anyone else's, regardless of being chair or not. And it's very brief. That when I first looked at this, I thought the location was over in the, I guess it would be the northeast corner, which I was very actually happy to suddenly realize, no, I've got the totally wrong corner. It's the northeast over by like where the playground is and so forth, which I think is a better location in terms of potential adverse impact on historical values and so on. And so my only comment is that for the purposes of the report, I think that we should recommend pretty much what Chuck just described, that if at all humanly possible, the preferred cladding would be brick cladding or construction, depending on, whatever. If they can't afford to build it out of solid masonry, at least clad it in brick so it's more harmonious with the courthouse and so on. And I think it's going to be small enough and far enough away that, in my humble opinion, it wouldn't have a big adverse impact. So next.
Mark, you want to go next? Mark Central.
So I echo what Glenn is saying, and I would be interested in a little bit more detail as to the architectural features of that pump house. I think it's critical that the pump house mirror the architectural features of the courthouse. Obviously, cost is an issue, but given the nature of the site and the beauty of the site, anything that would be different than the architectural features of the courthouse would really detract significantly from the project, I think.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else have a comment we want to weigh in on? Joe? See your hand up, Joe.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks. I'm glad that we did. I mean, I think it seemed like the materials that were posted did not address the the involvement of Charles Elliott, and I was surprised because, I mean, clearly Charles Elliott, the legacy of the Mall is really the legacy of Charles Elliott. Is one of his earliest projects as he experimented with certain ideas, as Mr. Griffin said, and from his voyages, his travels in Europe. And they were the precedents for future work with Olmsted and Elliott. If anyone who understands the the landscapes of Olmsted Partners. You know, it really is based on an artificial landscape, but one that is mimicking nature. I think my feeling here is that this is an intrusive object construction. I think the argumentation that Mr. Griffin gave was weak. I'm sorry. I think that he knows it's weak. I believe a vault, as was originally proposed and is included in the estimates from the work that was done in 2022 by Aqueous Engineers, clearly shows that there was going to be a concealed vault, manhole, whatever you want to call it. That manhole can really go anywhere on the site. It doesn't need to be constrained to any one particular area. There's going to be a well, what they call a bedrock well, in order to reach the groundwater level, which is deep. But the vault can be anywhere, and it can be buried, it can be concealed, and it can be accessed from above via hatch. I don't think there's going to be any kind of regular access to this. There's going to be maintenance access, but it does not need any kind of horizontal pathway. It can be the equipment can be maintained from a hatch from above, from the top of the vault. So I think that's not a very good reasoning, unless there are other things that have been left out. My next question is, why a dock? Why do we need a dock? Are people going to be fishing here? We're reestablishing wildlife, right? Frogs, maybe some ducks will fly in here. I don't know. It'd be great to have a clean pond, and that really is the goal. We want to fix the stagnant water situation, which was the situation when Charles Elliott was there. Except, even though unlike I think it's incorrect what Mr. Griffith said. There were the water technology and pumps were well along. You had Loami Baldwin engineer and Nathaniel Bradley in Boston, who produced this enormous system of clean water pumps from Cochituate to Boston, to the Beacon Hill Reservoir. Then in the 1870s and 80s, there was the big engineering pump house out at Chestnut Hill Reservoir. No, all of this was quite current, and we knew all about this. The reason why it didn't get done is because there was no money. No money was available in Newburyport to properly realize the vision of the architect or of the people who donated money for this. There was a solicitation for private monies, but it was not sufficient to really realize the full project, as Mr. Griffin knows. And that's the reason why we want to complete this and install the granite curbs, which was of great interest to the I guess the wealthy citizens of the town. But that was as I understand it, that was an aspect of the project that did not occur because of the lack of funds. So we're doing that. But I would hate to say that all of a sudden we're at that stage again where we don't have adequate funds to realize the correct project. If that's what we're being told, is that we don't have money to do it right, then why do we want to recreate what happened originally? Why don't we strive to produce the best, the most accurate, the most is to respond to the original intent of Elliott, and let's do the right thing relative to the landscape. I don't think creating a sort of this sort of postmodernist kind of thing there on the landscape with a dock, I don't think that really addresses the problem. We had a solution last year. It was a vault. It was probably a very cost-effective solution. It was one that was going to solve the problem of retrieving deep groundwater to feed the pond. And I think that we shouldn't stray from that solution. It was a good solution, and we should pursue it still. Let me see. I think I had one other thing here. I'm sorry to bore you, but Elliot never liked the courthouse. He's on record for saying that. He thinks this was a really ugly structure. Matching the courthouse for the for materials and for this, I think would be completely irrelevant. So I'm sorry, I really don't support this gesture at all as an architectural feature or as a historical feature. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Mr. Griffin, did you want, I see your hand is up. Did you want to respond to some of the?
Yes, I've got several points here.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of the first, I guess that's the second comments probably with Joe's have probably canceled the first somewhat, but the engineers are telling me that they want a doorway the width I'm showing here, and they want it at grade. They don't want to, they say they cannot approach this from above in a healthy or safe or separate way. They do not want to bury it. And if you look at the cross section, which unfortunately we don't have here, I wonder if Kim, if you could pull that up of how this whole thing works. That's one. Two, I think it has to be at this end. This is where the road is, etc. And I don't hear a pushback on that. I would disagree with respect with my friend Joe Morgan. Elliot, the only thing Charles Elliott criticized about the courthouse was the fact that it had been tarred and it was white on the foundation, and he said it's ugly from every direction. He wasn't talking about the entire building. I don't believe he was just talking about what had happened to it. But in any case, the courthouse exists. I think it's, oh, that's the other point I'd make here. The first person here that spoke, Mark Syndrome. Just a second now, I've already forgotten it. See, there's too many issues here. You guys have got, Joe, you've got me on too many different issues. Just a second, Mark, what was your point again? I wanted to address it.
Well, respecting the architectural features of the courthouse.
Okay, thank you. That's right. So I'd be saying to you, which one? I'm working now with others. It isn't just me, but we're working to bring back Bullfinch into the courthouse. There's only one side of that building that looks the way it did when he was alive, more or less the way. And I shouldn't say when he was alive, it was changed in 54. 50 years it remained as Bullfinch designed it, and then it was drastically changed. But the backside is his way to do it. So I wouldn't know, quite frankly, what details to add to make it more Bullfinch-like, and which Bullfinch. We'd have some granite banding, you know, if we could have, say, at the doorhead or something, a string course, or at the grade, a string course in white stone of some sort. That would be nice. There's ways to decorate this up. But I am working against budget considerations here. I already have a team that's very fearful that this is going to cost too much money.
And I just like to chime in about the dock and the purpose for the dock. So with all due respect, there is a desire within the Parks Commission, the administration, and the residents to bring boating recreation back to the pond, which is something that was done here up until the mid to late 80s. So the dock is absolutely necessary in order to bring a boating recreation back in. And in fact, the design team, the architectural team that's been working on this for quite some time is also working on the pond in Boston, the swan boats are, and the boats themselves actually contribute to the ecological health of that water body by creating circulation and oxygenation into the pond. So I would argue that that is an important component here, and it's not something that was willy-nilly added into the project with no consideration.
Great, thank you. Joe, I see your hand is still up. I don't know if you had any more questions or.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to respond to that.
Sure.
I think it's a pretty silly gesture myself. The dock, I don't think there is any real need and no express need for it. I think it's a justification. I would like to know why from Ms. Turner and Mr. Griffin, why the project is over budget. As we know.
We didn't say it was over budget. I'm sorry.
I want to
We
finish
didn't
my
say it was
question.
over budget.
I'd like to finish my question, please. From last year at the CPC meeting, we understood that there was an option. There was an alternative to save money in order to finance the installation of the granite curb, which is fine. In other words, instead of the remediation of the muck in the pond, it was going to be capped. Okay, that's fine. That saved almost $500,000. And I was told at that time that there was plenty of money to do everything that was in the estimate and in the scope. And the scope clearly calls out for a concealed vault pump room, and that there would be coordination with the landscape architect. I don't know who that person is.
That's me.
I'm sorry?
That's me.
That's you?
I'm a landscape architect registered in the state of Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. So did you coordinate with the engineer a concealed vault location? And why is it over budget?
It's not over budget. We still believe that we're going to be able to do the project. So you can still
install the vault with the pump, with the machinery, the pumps in a concealed location. That's not a problem. In terms of money, In terms of money, we believe there would probably be enough money to do a vault within the hill, but there were other logistical concerns, not the least of which is that it becomes an enclosed space that staff would have to maintain. That any equipment in that vault would have to be specially licensed to be in an enclosed structure. There were issues with weatherization and having to keep that watertight. Because as you know, groundwater could seep in through there. There were a number of logistical issues that just seemed that it was far more feasible and it was preferred to have it be in this location. And we worked again with Chuck Griffin, who, as you saw from the cross sections in the previous slide, and him being a member of the Parks Commission preferred this option as well. Okay, thank you.
Although this is Glenn speaking, from what you said just now, Kim, it sounds like it makes me wonder why the vault got in there originally, if it was not the preferred solution.
At the time, that was the preferred solution, but in looking at it more strictly with the engineering team and with the Parks Commission, this seemed like the better move.
I see. No information. All right. Just so you know, there was a member of the public that wants to make a comment. So maybe after all the commissioners have spoken, you might want to permit that.
That's my plan. Anyone else on the board have any comments, questions? Andrew Bernhardt, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just curious. Is it because it's a confined space and you don't have people able to go into a confined area?
Correct. There's a special license that's required for confined spaces, and there's only 1 or 2 people in DPS that have licenses to do that. So it would limit the number of people that could do maintenance in that vault.
And how much maintenance is required on an item of this nature?
It's unclear. Most of this will be automated, but of course there will be times, I would guess probably on a weekly basis, someone would have to access that vault, but I could get you specifics on that from our engineering team.
And in terms of design, are there alternatives to a vault that's not a confined space? 2 exits?
That I don't believe would be the case. I think that if it's embedded in the hillside, it's my understanding that it would be considered confined.
Okay.
Anyone else on the board have any questions or comments? We'll see anyone else. I guess I'll give some of my feedback. I think I guess I have a couple of questions. One, I'm curious about the orientation of the building at that spot. It looks like the kind of the corner of the building is pointed directly down the dock. Is there a reason for that kind of turned axis? Was it a meaningful turn, or is that more of a structural thing? Mr. Griffin, do you answer
It's
that?
not, it could be turned 45 degrees or whatever you like. It's that's not terribly important here. It's really north, south, east, west, pretty much within 5 degrees of that.
Yeah, I just when I look at it, I just kind of I don't know if the OCD in me or whatever. Just I feel like I could see some, if this building had a little more interest in it, because right now it just seems like the most utilitarian kind of brick box you could make with it. But if they had some sort of architectural interest in it, and it was oriented down that dock, I could just see some nice photographs. It would look picturesque and whatnot. But right now it just seems more of like it looks like some sort of industrial purposed building. I think that's my main feeling about it. But
Well, I think you're probably, I would take that as being a fair criticism. I didn't want to put windows in it because there is at least a 10 horsepower motor in this building running continuously and during the summers. And I don't want that sound to be let out. The engineers say it doesn't make much noise, but I'll have to admit that I'm concerned about the sound. So I was trying to keep it with just the one door, but it could have windows, it could have recesses. There's all kinds of things you could do to this building. The other thing I wanted to just go back a little bit from Joe and Kim's discussion about money. We hope to get approval here from Concom very soon. And with that, we hope to get out to bid. As you well know, as Newburyporters, the prices are blowing up on our face. And I don't think we can sit here today, I certainly can't, and say this is going to come in on the budget, even though the budget we did think would be plenty. Today I was talking to a builder about this issue. My son's a contractor. And we're seeing prices almost double for very ordinary things. So there is a very real worry among the design team, right or not, Joe. Whether that's accurate or not, there's no way for any of us to know sitting here today whether this is going to be on budget. If we have excess money or more money, I think there's no one who'd be against putting more money into the structure if you think that would help it. I don't think by putting it into the hillside with those big cheek walls is going to be less noticeable than what it is. And I think it makes the vault highly inflexible. We are involved here with a project that's really never been done, is to take this water body and do something with it and know for sure that it's going to work. What if we need to change it? What if we need more room? How are we going to solve that unless it's freestanding? That was one of my ideas, is if it was freestanding, we can adjust it. If it's buried, it's really, really awkward. But thank you for your comments. They're fairly made.
okay, thank you. I think if no one else on the board has any comments, I'll open up to any public comment. If you wish to speak, you must raise your hand. Be recognized. If you can do so with the controls in the Zoom. If you're on the telephone, please press *9 to raise or lower your hand. And then once we recognize you, you'll need to unmute yourself. Looks like Patricia Pecknick, you have your hand up. Can we unmute her? Okay, great.
Hi, yes, Patricia Pecknick, 4 Dove Street. I agree with everything that Commissioner Joe Morgan has said about the concealed vault being far preferable to this utility shed. The mall is our oldest landscape. It's been a public way since early in the 18th century, and there is an intentional and a dramatic visual relationship between all the existing buildings, the courthouse, the old jail, the Kelly School, and in fact, the cemetery. Those of you who were on the commission a few years ago may remember that in discussing a PR at the old jail, we looked at Martha McNamara's book, From Tavern to Courthouse, Architecture and Ritual in American Law, which talked about the mall as this exemplary landscape of refined civic buildings and a promenade. It's really the jewel of the city. I would like to let you all think about the fact that at council the other night, there was a discussion about whether or not some councilors thought it would be a good idea to vote that CPA money already allocated to the Bartlett Mall Historic Restoration Project be reallocated to Market Landing Park, since the cost estimates for that project had escalated. And council voted against doing that. But the fact that it came up in discussion at all tells me that when the chips are down, despite the city's $97 million budget, that there may be more councilors than those 4 who would vote for the cost-saving alternatives made possible in the current plan. And I truly, sincerely believe that if you approve such a building and you leave it open to the cost-saving alternative of wood siding, that is what we will all get. And I would strongly object to that as a member of the public and a fan of the mall. Thank you very much for letting me speak, and thank you all for serving on the most important commission we have.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the public forum that would like to speak? Seeing anyone else? Okay, I guess that.
I'm sorry, Beth, to interrupt you. This is
Go
Glenn.
ahead,
So
Glenn.
a minor correction. The speaker, Patricia, said, urges us, talks about our approval. Just to clarify everything, our role here, as I'm sure you know, we don't have the authority to approve or disapprove it. We are simply in the position of, well, not simply, it's an important position to make recommendations and advisory report to the planning board, who has I believe they have the ultimate authority. They have to issue a special permit for this. So, so all these.
I believe your advice. I've always considered it to be all powerful and omnipotent.
Oh,
Therefore,
well,
I
I
praise
wish
it.
the planning board felt the same way.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. That was it. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I guess at this point then if there's any motions to have the chair write up either a recommendation or just our thoughts on this, or if there's any motions in that.
Vice Chair, may I make another comment? This is Joe Morgan.
Absolutely, Joe, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I am trying to separate the design issue from the budgeting issue. I'm not convinced that we have not landed here because of budgeting problems. It sounds to me, especially from what Ms. Pecknick just said, that and from what Mr. Griffin said, is that there are some problems economy-wide, but also here in Newburyport, where some of the budgeting that's been done in the last couple of years for CPC projects, that there are cost overruns. So we're going to be seeing some of these issues played out perhaps elsewhere also. I'd hate to make a response. I'd hate to respond to this knowing that what we've run into is a budgetary issue and we cannot resolve it correctly because all of a sudden we find ourselves with a deficit here. We can't do it because we don't have sufficient funds. I don't want to make that kind of decision, and I kind of resent having to be presented with sort of a kind of a last minute drop dead kind of decision. I believe I believe that any historical landscape deserves better than that. Like I said before, I don't think we are doing a service. We're not doing our best job if we find ourselves in the exact same position that people found themselves, the donors found themselves back in 1887 or whenever it was, where they had a vision, but they could not pay for it. And I mean, I think that would look incredibly foolish to make a mistake this time when we have a clear vision of what we want, but here we are trying to find a compromise, which I think just does not work. And it's not faithful to the original historical landscape as Ms. Pecknick was talking about. So my point is that we should segregate what is truly a design issue and what is a budgetary issue. If we don't have the money to pay for the original scope, then we should find out why and what are our options relative to supplementing that so that we can realize our project, the one that was approved. Thank you.
Okay. Well, now, yeah, I'm not sure if we want to make a motion to make any recommendations to what we'd like to see from this going forward, or how we want to approach this.
Well, what I could propose, Biff, is that if the commission assents, I could draft a report that attempts to accommodate or incorporate, I should say, the comments that have been made, and the significant concerns that have been raised. There seems to one issue that is puzzling me a little bit is it sounds like it, and this is a kind of a question, I guess, for the presenters, probably Kim. It sounds like that there is a hydrogeological reason for locating something, whether it's an underground or above ground structure for housing pumping related stuff in this specific location, which but what my fellow commissioner Joe Morgan said, it sounds like he was under the impression some of this stuff could be virtually anywhere. So I'd love to get clarification on that, because we can't make a recommendation without accurate information. And can you comment on that?
And perhaps the thing to do would be to ask our engineering team to come to a future meeting to answer some of the more specific engineering questions that you have, such as this. It's my understanding that this is the preferred location for any number of logistical reasons, of which some of I've mentioned earlier.
Right.
So I don't know that I can answer that to the extent that you're asking tonight.
Okay.
I'm happy to either do that via memo or have them come to a future meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would the same answer hold for, let's say, that is a hillside, as you can see from the topographical lines? Did anyone consider a structure that was sort of semi-underground? In other words, just like a house built on the side of a hill, part of it may be underground midway or so it'd be a little not quite so prominent in the landscape. Was any of that ever considered?
Yep, that was one of the first things that we looked at, and there was pushback from the Parks Commission on that location. So we're trying to balance the desires of a number of different permitting bodies and approval bodies here, unfortunately.
I'm sorry. So the Parks Commission felt it's a better option to have a fully above ground building, huh?
That's my understanding, yes, from when we presented to them.
Well,
It would be more visible if it were at the nose of the grading of that northwest corner. It was a partial protrusion from that corner that it would be too visible as you're coming down the ramp.
Okay, well, Were you, Chuck, were you on the Parks Commission at the time? Are you familiar with that discussion as far as location and partial obscuration or obfuscation of this particular structure?
Sure, I was there. If we put it, Kim, if you go back, there was a drawing that you popped up. Not mine, just the one that's on the corner here.
Right.
I'm not seeing my cursor, I don't think. But if you put it on the corner of the bullnose, and that's all new, that grading, and it's going to be very visible from the entire surrounding park.
Right.
And if you put a trench into it, like the lower, see the first drawing down below? You cut that hillside with such big cheek walls, which it needs if it's to hold the earth back. It's highly visible. So this scheme, I tried to take it around the corner and put it so that you really would have a harder time seeing it.
Right.
This was my first choice, but there's quite a few reasons that I guess this doesn't work as well.
Right. I was thinking more if you go back to, well, or even on this slide, you can see. So the current proposed location for the above ground building is sort of at the bottom of the topographical drawing here, right? As the shoreline curves toward the south. I was thinking.
Yes, it's down there.
Yeah, I was thinking that's also a hillside, not as steep as the one up to the playground. I was just thinking keep the basic location you had in your current proposal, but just kind of push it back toward the northwest or west a bit to partially embed it into the hillside, just to make it less of a looking like someone plunked a utility shed, as it's been called, onto the shoreline there. Where
the other, if I may, the other issue, I think what I'm understanding you're saying is if we took the current proposal and pushed it just due north so that it was within the shallower part of that northwest corner hillside, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, if north is up on this illustration, it would be west, but whatever that directly to the left.
I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like, in other words, directly away from the dock.
Got it.
That was my thought.
And more into that steep grade so that.
Yeah, so there is a tree, an existing multi-stemmed birch tree that's not shown on this plan that's actually immediately to the left of the pump house. You can see it in the illustrative to the bottom right there. That would be damaged if we put it into that hillside. And similarly on the original proposed plan that's in the slide just before this one, if you can tell from the topography lines there, this would actually really undermine the slope as it comes towards the northwest corner, because you can see those topo lines are being sculpted away and kind of eaten away in order to get this the sort of tunnel into the vault to work. And there's an existing tree that would also be compromised in this scenario here. This was sort of the scenario that was going to be the compromise between the initial proposal, which was to put it right at the nose of that northwest slope, partially embedded. That was not preferred by the Parks Commission. This was another option that was also not preferred because of the, just the pure earth movement that would have to happen and the destruction of that mature tree. So then also understanding from DPS the enclosed space situation, logistics of that. This in working closely with Mr. Griffin on trying to come up with a what we thought was a nice architectural proposal with the freestanding pump house that would be fairly small and in keeping with the design of the courthouse, that it would be preferred, but it sounds like maybe that's not the case. There'd also, we're also, as Chuck mentioned, we're about 85% of our way done with permitting with conservation. There's, I can list off, we've gone through Army Corps, we've gone through MEPA, DEP, Concom, we're about to apply for a variance with ADA with the state, Parks Commission, and now Historical Commission and Planning Board. As you can imagine, there's a lot of conflicting information we're getting from a lot of different boards, and it's trying to balance the needs and desires of each one of the boards. And unfortunately, that's a challenge we're willing to accept, but we're sort of hoping there is a compromise to be met here. And hopefully explaining the decision process through how we've gone through a number of iterations on this plan would help you understand where we've landed, why we've landed where we have. And yes, we still do believe that we have the budget to do this. We've had a gut check from contractors within the last 2 weeks that still say that should be within budget, but as permitting drags out here and the real potential to move this into the next fiscal year, beyond the threat from the city council to pull the funding from this and add it to Market Landing Park, there's the cost escalation of trying to go from fiscal year 23 to 24. So any number of those reasons are the reasons why we're asking for a little bit of leeway here to potentially have a project that could be approved by this body.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Kim. All right. So Biff, to get back to what I was going to suggest is, I'm willing to, draft something up that attempts to incorporate, everything that we've discussed tonight, including, just the things that we've deliberated and the pros and cons, and come up with our preferred solution, if you will, or if one can be said to be there. But I would definitely want that to be reviewed by you guys in 2 weeks to make sure that I did get that correctly. Because as going around it, there still seems to me a lot of I wouldn't want to get it wrong, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Well, on that note, if there's someone that would like to make a motion to have our chair write us up our cares, wishes, and responses to this project.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Mark, anyone second that?
I will second Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. All right. So let's take a vote here. I'll start with Andrew Bernhardt.
I'm curious about the vote. I mean, I thought we were not voting. Oh, on the
on whether he's going to write up our recommendation.
You should write. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Mark Centro.
Yes.
Joe Morgan.
Yes.
And Chris Sautel. Didn't hear you, Chris.
Don't see this video either. I'm not sure what happened to it.
See it freezing up.
I don't know.
We'll circle back around to you. Okay. One moment. Biff votes yes. Glenn.
Yeah, I'll be a yes.
Okay, and we'll try once more. Chris, if you can give a thumbs up, maybe for a yes. I don't know. I'm not seeing you.
Yeah, not seeing it either. Well, do we have 4 yays?
Yeah, we've got it. We have it. So
okay.
That has passed. Let's see. I believe. Are there any other updates? Anything from the planning department?
Nothing from the planning department tonight. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't have any updates either, Biff.
Thank you. All right. Well, then, let's see. Everyone's taking a look at the minutes. I know that Glenn had a small change to be made, but other than that, does anyone have a motion to approve the minutes?
Yeah, this is Glenn. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes with the minor changes that Joe Morgan and myself discussed with Gretchen.
I will second Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, and your vote, Andrew?
Yes.
And Mark Centrone?
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Sautel, can we hear you?
I see his image now.
That's a yes. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you now. Great. And Biff House Vice Chair, I vote in the affirmative.
Yeah.
And Glenn?
Yeah, affirmative, yes.
Okay. All right, so the minutes from last meeting have been approved, and unless we have anything else, someone is free to make a motion to
As,
adjourn.
as a first, I want to be the one to make the motion to adjourn.
All right.
I'll second the motion.
Great. All right. Well, let's go around the horn. Andrew Bernhardt
Yes.
and Mark Sandrone.
Yep.
And Christopher Fay.
He's absent.
Oh, sorry. That's right. And Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Chris Sautel.
That's
I think I got a yes there.
yes,
Okay, great.
yes.
I will
Yes.
vote in the affirmative.
Yep.
And Glenn Richards.
Well, I don't know. Yeah,
Two-
yes.
Okay, yes. All right, we already had a quorum, so I will call this meeting of the Historical Commission to order and to adjournment.
Thank you very much, Biff. Appreciate you stepping in.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody. Probably should be back next meeting.
Have a good night.
Thank you all.
Vice Chair. Good night, everyone.
Good night.